When someone visits a loved one's grave every Sunday for 15 years, the last thing they expect is to see that person alive, standing on their doorstep, holding a little girl's hand. Garrett Hayes, a 32-year-old history teacher at Jefferson High School in Denver, is the author of these lines. For the past 15 years, his life had been shadowed by a tragic event. His father, Roland Hayes, died in a car accident when Garrett was only 17. Since then, every Sunday, regardless of the weather, he and his mother Vera visited Roland's grave in Section C, Plot 247 at Riverside Cemetery. They brought fresh daisies and shared their news with the headstone. However, 3 weeks ago, on an ordinary Saturday evening in October, Garrett's world shattered in an instant, much like the coffee mug that slipped from his hand as he opened his front door. The man on the porch looked at Garrett with his own eyes. Not just eyes of a similar color, but an exact replica, down to the tiny golden fleck in the left iris that his mother always called the Hayes family trait. He had the same jawline, a slightly crooked nose, the result of a break Garrett sustained in his youth playing baseball. Only this stranger's break must have happened much earlier. A tiny scar was visible above his left eyebrow, a genetic feature passed down through generations of Hayes men. "Hello, son," he said in a voice Garrett always imagined ghosts would have if they could speak. It was deep yet soft, with a slight Pacific Northwest lilt that softened his words. "We need to talk about why your mother told you I was dead." The little girl, holding his hand, looked at Garrett with the same Hayes eyes, clutching a well-worn stuffed elephant to her chest. Her dark curls were braided and tied with colorful bands, purple and green. Dinosaur patches adorned her pink backpack, and her sneakers had light-up soles that flashed with every step. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging on his leather jacket, "is this the brother you told me about? The one who teaches big kids about old stuff?" The coffee mug Garrett held slipped from his grasp and shattered into 17 pieces. He counted them later, after his world stopped falling apart. 17 shards, one for each year he had believed his father was dead. Roland stepped forward, allowing the porch light to fully illuminate his face. "Garrett, I know this is unbelievable. I know your mind is refusing to accept what you're seeing, but I'm real. I'm alive. And that grave you and your mother visit every week has been empty since the day the headstone was placed there." Garrett's feet felt rooted to the ground. He gripped the doorframe, leaving nail marks in the wood. "You're dead. There was a funeral. Mom identified your body. She has your death certificate framed in her study next to your memorial flag." "It was all staged," Roland replied quietly. "Your mother planned everything. She had her reasons. Reasons she deemed compelling enough to lie for 15 years. But 3 months ago, everything changed. The man who forced me into hiding died, and with his death, I was free to knock on your door." The little girl, no older than 6, watched anxiously, her small brow furrowed. "Daddy, why is Garrett scared? You said he'd be happy to meet me." Roland knelt before her. The motion was so familiar it made Garrett's heart clench. He had seen that gentle crouch in old home videos, his father kneeling to tie his childhood shoelaces, to put a bandage on scraped knees, to look him in the eye when teaching important things. "Remember what we talked about, Penny? Sometimes adults get big surprises that take time to understand. Your brother just got the biggest surprise of his life." Life had delivered a staggering surprise. "Penny," he uttered. "My sister's name is Penny." "I have a sister." The words felt alien. Roland stood and confirmed, "You have another child, a daughter, born 6 years ago in Portland. Her mother passed away last year. Now we are all each other has for family. When I finally gained my freedom and the ability to find you, I knew I couldn't keep you apart any longer. She has a right to know her brother, and you deserve to know the truth." Garrett stared at the man with his father's face and voice, who claimed to be his father. His mind refused to accept this reality. Dead men don't knock on doors, empty graves don't produce living fathers, and Sunday cemetery visits don't end in resurrections. "If you are truly Roland Hayes," Garrett said, choosing his words carefully, "tell me something only my father would know. Something Mom couldn't have told anyone else." A smile spread across the man's face, as if Garrett was looking at his own reflection, aged a quarter century. "When you were 7, you broke your mom's antique vase playing baseball in the house. You were terrified of being grounded for the entire summer. I helped you glue it back together, and we used clear nail polish to hide the cracks. We told Mom the cat knocked it over. To this day, she doesn't know the truth." The memory hit Garrett like a physical blow. His mother still had that vase, and she still recounted the story of the cat mysteriously knocking it over, but thankfully not shattering it completely. Garrett had believed himself the only one who knew the truth. "My God," he breathed, "it really is you. You're alive." "I am alive," Roland confirmed. "And Garrett, son, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Your mother didn't do this to hurt you. In her mind, she was protecting you from something she believed would ruin your future. 15 years ago, she made an impossible choice, and whether it was right or wrong, she did it out of love." Penny tugged on Garrett's hand with her small fingers. "Are you crying?" "Daddy says it's okay for boys to cry. He cried when we drove here. He cried a lot." Garrett touched his face and found it wet with tears. 15 years of grief poured out, mingling with fury, confusion, and a wild, desperate hope that perhaps he could have his father back. "Come in," Garrett said. "Both of you, come inside and explain how my dead father is standing on my porch. Explain why my mother took me to mourn at an empty grave. Explain everything." As they entered the apartment, Penny's sneakers flashed with each step. Garrett noticed the hallway adorned with photographs: Roland in military uniform, Roland holding baby Garrett, Roland and Vera on their wedding day. All pictures of a dead man who was now sitting on the couch, helping his 6-year-old daughter remove her dinosaur backpack. That night, Garrett understood that the dead don't always stay buried. Sometimes they return, carrying pink backpacks and stuffed elephants, ready to explain why they had to die. Garrett's Sunday routine had remained unchanged for 15 years, as fixed as the name engraved on his father's headstone. Every Sunday morning at precisely 7 o'clock, his alarm clock rang, though he usually lay awake for an hour before that, staring at the ceiling and preparing for another visit to the dead. He showered, dressed in cemetery-appropriate attire, as his mother called it, which meant khaki pants and a button-down shirt, never jeans or t-shirts. "We must show respect for the dead, Garrett," she would say whenever he tried to dress more casually in his youth. "Your father deserves our best." The drive to his mother's house took exactly 12 minutes from Garrett's apartment near downtown Denver. He pulled into her driveway at 7:45, and she would already be waiting by the kitchen window, watching for his car, as she had every Sunday since Dad died, or since she told him he died. The distinction mattered now, though for 15 years it had not. Every Sunday, for a decade and a half, began the same way. Breakfast was an unvarying ritual: fluffy scrambled eggs, toasted wheat bread, thin slices of turkey, crispy bacon, and freshly squeezed orange juice. His mother, moving at the stove with practiced grace, told stories about his father. These tales, familiar in every detail, were never interrupted. Sunday morning recollections had become as sacred a rite for her as the cemetery visit was for her son. "Your father loved to teach," she'd said this past Sunday, deftly flipping the eggs. "Before you were born, he volunteered at the community center, teaching adults to read. He often said, 'Education is a treasure that cannot be stolen.'" Her son nodded, spreading raspberry jam on his toast, the same jam his mother claimed his father adored. His entire life seemed filtered through the prism of his father's legacy. His career choice, his hobbies, even his culinary preferences, all shaped by the tastes of a man who was no longer alive, yet whose preferences were meticulously preserved and relayed by his mother over countless Sunday breakfasts. After the meal, they would drive to Riverside Cemetery. His mother, insisting on driving, explained that being behind the wheel gave her a sense of control over these emotionally charged trips. The cemetery, a 14-minute drive from the house, greeted them with classical music emanating from the car's speakers, Bach or Mozart, but never anything with lyrics. "Your father found peace in classical music," she would share. "It helped him focus and reflect." At 9 a.m., when the cemetery gates opened, they were invariably among the first visitors. Section C, Plot 247, had become as familiar to her son as his own address. A simple gray granite headstone read, "Roland Hayes, beloved husband and father, 1968 to 2009. Below it was an engraved quote, chosen by his mother: "To live in the hearts of those we leave behind is not to die." The irony of those words stung. His mother would kneel, filling the vase attached to the headstone with fresh daisies. Always daisies, never roses, lilies, or carnations. Daisies symbolize innocence and purity, she had explained once. Your father was the purest soul I ever met. They stood there for exactly 30 minutes. His mother addressed the headstone as if his father could hear her, recounting the current events of their lives. Garrett's students adore him, Roland. He inherited your gift for making history come alive. Remember how you'd stage the Boston Tea Party in the living room? He does the same thing in his classroom. Her son also shared news, telling the granite and grass about the past week, its challenges and successes. After 15 years, it felt natural, like leaving a voicemail for someone who would never call back, but was listening nonetheless. Dad, I finally asked Jennifer from the science department out, he'd shared 6 months ago, touching the cold stone. And she said yes. I think you would have liked her. She's smart, kind, and laughs at my silly jokes like Mom says you did. But the relationship didn't last long, only 3 months. Jennifer couldn't understand why he wouldn't miss a single Sunday cemetery visit, not even for her birthday. You seem more attached to a dead man than to the living, she'd observed. And she was right. Sometimes, after his mother had driven home, Garrett would return to the cemetery alone. It was only 3 blocks from his apartment, within walking distance when he needed to clear his head. He'd sit on the grass next to his father's plot, grading student papers, preparing for classes, living his life in the company of the dead. The cemetery groundskeeper, an older man named Walter, knew him by name. "Good evening, Garrett," he'd greeted him at dusk. "Spending time with your old man again?" He was a good listener, Garrett would reply, repeating a conversation they'd had dozens of times. Walter would nod understandingly. The dead always are. Garrett's apartment had become a sort of memorial to Roland Hayes. The hallway was adorned with 13 framed photographs, gifts from his mother over the years. His father in army fatigues, taken during his brief service before Garrett was born. His father holding newborn Garrett, his face beaming with pride. His father and mother on their wedding day, young and hopeful. His father teaching Garrett to ride a bike, his hand on the seat, ready to let go, but not quite yet. The agonizing burden of the past weighed on him like a heavy cloak, woven from memories and loss. His heart clung to fleeting images, ready to let go, yet still unable to find peace. Like a diligent researcher studying ancient artifacts, he delved into old photographs, hoping to find the lost features of a man whose image faded in the mists of time. 17 years, an age when memories should be vibrant and clear, yet trauma, like a skilled artist, had blurred the outlines of the past. Only fragments surfaced, the tart scent of his father's cologne, the infectious sound of his laugh, a light touch on his hair. Whole scenes, heartfelt conversations, all had vanished, replaced by his mother's carefully preserved stories. Every important decision in the young man's life was made with a silent question in mind. What would Dad say? When he chose to become a teacher, his mother couldn't hold back tears, exclaiming, "Your father always dreamed you'd follow in his footsteps." When he bought a sensible Honda Civic instead of a sleek sports car, he received an approving nod. Your father valued substance over flash above all else. Even the living room decor echoed his father's tastes, brown leather sofa and armchairs, exuding a dignified scent of age, bookshelves filled with history tomes. For as his father used to say, a library is the mirror of the soul, a chess set on the coffee table, a symbol of life's strategy. Life had become a museum dedicated to a phantom of the past, with his mother serving as its devoted curator. Every Sunday, they polished the exhibits together with tears and memories, maintaining a fragile fiction that had become their truth. However, the idol shattered in an instant, like a crystal vase dashed against a stone. Saturday evening, October 14th, 8:47 p.m. A time forever etched in his memory, recorded in the margins of a student's essay on the Battle of Gettysburg. A knock at the door came, insistent and sharp, 3 short raps echoing through the quiet apartment. Annoyed, he put down his red pen. No one visited him on Saturday evenings. His neighbors knew him as a boring history teacher who spent his weekends with documentaries and grading papers. Through the peephole, he saw a man in a well-worn leather jacket, holding the hand of a little girl in a pink fuzzy coat, inappropriate for warm October. Lost tourists, probably, he thought. The apartment complex was near several hotels, and visitors often got confused. With a helpful teacher's smile, he opened the door, ready to assist. The bright porch light illuminated the stranger's face. The words caught in his throat. His brain, like a computer encountering incompatible data, churned out error after error. The man had his nose, with the slight bump from a childhood fall, his thick eyebrows, which Garrett had to pluck regularly to avoid a unibrow. His mouth, with a corner that lifted slightly when he smiled. But most incredible of all, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the haze mark, passed down through generations. "Garrett," the man said softly, his voice carrying the weariness of years lived. "I know this is hard to believe, but I'm your father. I'm Roland, and I'm alive." The coffee mug slipped from his hands and shattered against the hardwood floor. A dark puddle spread around the shards. His legs buckled, and he frantically gripped the doorframe. "My father is dead," he said automatically, as if stating an axiom. "I visit his grave every Sunday. He died 15 years ago." The girl tugged on the man's jacket, looking up at him with questioning eyes that unmistakably bore the haze features. "Daddy, is this my brother you told me about?" "Brother?" The word struck him like lightning. In Roland's gaze, directed at the girl, there was so much tenderness that Garrett's heart constricted with pain. "Yes, Penny. This is Garrett." "You're dead," he repeated, retreating further into the apartment, his mind fixated on that single, undeniable truth. "I have a death certificate, a funeral program. Mom has the insurance payout receipt framed in her office, next to your memorial flag." Like a ghost from the past, Roland materialized in the doorway of the apartment. His presence felt like a cold draft from long-forgotten times. His movements were full of caution, as if he were approaching a timid animal, afraid of startling it with a sudden gesture. "Son, there's no easy way to say this," he began, his words echoing in the quiet room. "Your mother wove a web of lies around you for 15 years. The grave you visit is as empty as my hopes for the truth. I never died. She forced me to disappear, as if I were a ghost, and only recently did I gather enough courage to break our fateful bargain." "Bargain?" Garrett whispered, his voice trembling, as if reliving that tragic moment in the hospital waiting room when his mother had told him his father died in a car crash. With a certainty that betrayed years of restraint, he pulled a driver's license from his wallet. Roland Hayes. The photo was recent, perhaps a year old, like a captured moment of fleeting life. The address indicated Portland, Oregon. The birth date matched the one in Garrett's memory. The organ donor designation, like a seal of authenticity, lent a surreal credibility to the unfolding events. "Your mother gave me an ultimatum 15 years ago," he said, his voice laced with raw pain, as if the words were torn from a wounded heart. "Disappear without a trace, or she would destroy our lives with something she knew. She faked my death, collected insurance payouts, and convinced everyone I had died driving drunk. But the truth, Garrett, is far more complex and tangled." "Drunk," Garrett blurted out, anger flaring like a match thrown into dry kindling. "She said you were hit by a drunk driver. She presented you as the victim of a tragic accident." Roland's face contorted in pain, as if reliving that fateful moment. "I know. She changed the story depending on who she was talking to, like a chameleon adapting to its environment. To some, I was a drunk driver. To others, an innocent victim. That ambiguity kept people confused, made them stop asking uncomfortable questions." Just then, Penny walked into the living room and fixed her gaze on the chess set on the coffee table. "Daddy, he has a chess set just like you," she announced, as if discovering an important truth. "Mom said you loved chess," Garrett murmured, trying to process what he'd heard. "She said you believed it taught life strategy." "I hate chess," Roland said quietly, his words like a thunderclap. "Always have. Too slow, too pretentious. I'm a poker player." "Always have been," he added bitterly. Another cornerstone of Garrett's life crumbled to dust, like an old structure unable to withstand the test of time. How many more lies had been artfully woven into the fabric of his life? "Why should I believe you?" Garrett demanded, his teacher's instinct for fact-checking kicking in. "You could be anyone. You could be a con artist impersonating my father." Roland pulled a thick manila envelope from his jacket pocket, as if retrieving carefully guarded secrets from a hidden cache. Because I have proof. 15 years of proof, gathered piece by piece. Bank statements from Portland confirming my life there. Photos of Penny and me taken after she was born. And most importantly, the death certificate of the man who helped me disappear, along with his signed confession clearing my name. What man? What confession? What are you talking about? Garrett asked, his voice full of bewilderment. Garrett sank onto the couch, his legs buckling, as if no longer able to bear the weight of the truth that had crashed down upon him. 15 years ago, I made a fateful mistake at work. I was an accountant for the Denver city government, working in the Treasury Department. I discovered that my boss, Harold Brennan, was embezzling. He had been siphoning funds from city pension accounts for years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, like a greedy beast devouring other people's savings. Did you report him? Garrett asked, hoping for an affirmative answer. I tried, but Harold was cunning, influential, and paranoid, like a spider spinning its web. When I threatened to go to the authorities, he had already set a trap. He had been framing me for months, creating fake documents, forging my signatures, building a case that I was the embezzler. The evidence was irrefutable and artfully fabricated. So you ran? Garrett's voice was accusatory. No, Roland replied firmly. I was arrested quietly, discreetly, to avoid a scandal before the mayoral election. Your mother was working as a nurse at the county jail then, conducting medical exams for incoming inmates. That's how she found out what happened. Penny climbed onto the couch beside Garrett, studying his face with a perceptiveness unique to children. You look sad, like Daddy sometimes, she observed. Your mother, Roland continued, was determined that night. She knew Harold Brennan, knew his reputation, knew I was framed. But she also understood that proving it would take years, if it was even possible. A trial would be public and humiliating. Even if I was eventually acquitted, the stain of dishonor would remain forever. She said she wouldn't let you grow up as the son of an embezzler. So what did she do? Garrett asked, already grasping the extent of his mother's deception. She made a deal, Roland replied. She went to Harold, claiming she had damaging information on him, though to this day, I don't know what it was. She offered a solution. You disappear completely, your death is faked, you never return to Colorado, and in exchange, all charges are dropped. Harold avoids retribution for his schemes, but is free from the fear of exposure. You get to grow up without the stigma. In the end, everyone wins, except the truth. Everyone wins? Garrett retorted, leaping to his feet, anger eclipsing his shock. For 15 years, I grieved your loss. Do you have any idea what I went through? Every Father's Day, every birthday, every graduation, I stood at your fictitious grave, wondering what you would have said about me. Believe me, I know what it's like, Roland replied, his composure cracking. Because I lived it too, just from the other side. I watched you from afar, Garrett. Every graduation, I was somewhere nearby. Your college diploma, your award ceremony for best teacher. I saw it all. I just couldn't let you see me. With trembling hands, Garrett snatched his phone, his finger hovering over his mother's contact. In the photo attached to her name, they were captured last Christmas. They wore matching sweaters she insisted on every year. She looked so ordinary, so innocent, completely unlike a person who had woven a web of deceit for 15 years. Please, Roland pleaded, holding up a hand. Let me explain everything before you call her. You deserve to know the whole truth before you do. Explain what exactly? Garrett cried, 15 years of suppressed pain erupting in a furious torrent. That you abandoned me? That you chose to run instead of fighting for the truth? That you let me, like an idiot, stand at an empty grave every Sunday, talking to nothing? Penny began to cry, her small face crumpled in distress, clinging to Roland's leg. The sound of her tears cut through Garrett's anger like a knife. She was only 6, an innocent casualty in a family drama she couldn't possibly comprehend. He knelt to her level, trying to soften his voice. Hey, it's okay. I'm sorry I yelled, I'm just surprised. I'm not mad at you. She peeked at him with one eye, the other still buried in Roland's jeans. Daddy said you're nice. He said you teach kids history, and you make it fun with costumes and stuff. How does he know that? Garrett asked, looking at Roland. I kept track of you, Roland admitted. Google alerts, social media, school newsletters. When you won Teacher of the Year last spring, I sat in my apartment in Portland and cried with pride. When you staged that Revolutionary War reenactment with your students, I watched the video the school posted 17 times. You stalked me online while I talked to your fake grave, Garrett said in a flat voice. I wrote you letters, Roland said unexpectedly, pulling another envelope from his jacket pocket. Hundreds of them. I never sent them, but I wrote them. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw something about you online, they're all here. The envelope was thick, its edges worn from frequent handling. Garrett saw dates scrawled in the margins of the pages, stretching back for years. His anger faltered, confronted by the physical evidence that he hadn't been forgotten. Why now? Garrett demanded, standing again. Why did you break your deal with Mom now? Harold Brennan died 3 months ago, Roland replied simply. Pancreatic cancer. Before he died, he confessed everything. His lawyer contacted me because Harold left instructions to clear my name posthumously. He couldn't face justice, but he could at least free me from the prison of his lies. Roland handed Garrett a newspaper clipping from the Denver Post, 3 months old. The headline read, Former City Treasurer Dies, Leaving Confession of Decade-Long Embezzlement Scheme. The photo of Harold Brennan showed a gaunt man in a hospital bed, nothing like the powerful figure who had seemingly destroyed Garrett's family. The shadow of the past seemed to loom over his life once more, threatening to shatter his fragile peace. The confession clearly states I was framed, Roland continued, as if justifying himself. The district attorney officially dropped all charges against me. I'm completely free, Garrett. And the first thing that came to my mind was the chance to come back to you, to come home. Home? Garrett's voice was laced with bitterness and sarcasm. You have another daughter, another life. This isn't your home anymore. Little Penny timidly tugged on his shirt, as if seeking reassurance. We don't have a home. Mommy's in heaven now, and we had to leave our apartment. Daddy hopes we can live near you. Like a bolt of lightning, it dawned on Garrett, this wasn't just about family reunification. They needed his help, his support. Is that true? He asked, looking into Roland's eyes. Roland nodded, and the weariness, previously concealed, showed in every line on his face. Penny's mom, Linda, passed away 13 months ago. Breast cancer. We were together for 8 years. Common law, but devoted. After she died, I couldn't afford the apartment anymore, working as a substitute teacher. We've been living in a motel for the past week, while I worked up the courage to knock on your door. In a motel? Garrett shifted his gaze to Penny, only now noticing details that had previously escaped his attention, slightly wrinkled clothes, scuff marks on her backpack, and the way she clutched the stuffed elephant tightly, as if it were her lifeline. The Sunset Lodge on Colfax, Roland admitted. Not the best place, but safe enough. Garrett knew the motel. It was a place where people found temporary shelter, living between homes, between lives. Not a place for a 6-year-old. You should have come sooner, he said, a pang of guilt in his voice. And what would I have said? Hi, I'm your resurrected father. I need money. You deserved more than to see me desperate. You deserved the truth, presented properly with proof. Garrett picked up his phone again, ready to dial. I'm calling Mom. She needs to know you're here. She'll have to explain herself. Wait, Roland stopped him. There's something else you need to know about her collusion with Harold, why he agreed so easily to her terms. What? Your mother was having an affair with him. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Garrett laughed involuntarily. The very idea seemed absurd. Mom and an affair? She hadn't dated anyone since his supposed death. She still wore her wedding ring. She wears it as a symbol of penitence, Roland said quietly. She had an affair with Harold for 2 years before I discovered the embezzlement. When I was arrested, she realized Harold had used their relationship to monitor me, to know if I suspected anything. She had photos, emails, evidence of their liaison that could destroy his marriage and political ambitions. So she blackmailed her lover to save you? To save you, Roland corrected him. She didn't care about me anymore, but she couldn't bear the thought of you suffering because of our mistakes. Faking my death was her idea. She said, if I'm gone, truly gone, you can mourn me and move on. If I'm in jail or fighting charges, it will define your entire life. Garrett dialed his mother's number, his decision made. Regardless of her motives or justifications, she owed him the truth face to face. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice sounding cheerful and carefree. "Garrett, dear, what a pleasant surprise. Are you ready for tomorrow? I thought we could have breakfast at that new place near the cemetery." "Mom, I need you to come to my house right now." Her voice immediately registered alarm. "Is everything all right? You sound strange." "Just come. It's important." "Garrett, you're scaring me. What happened?" He looked at Roland, at Penny, at the shards of the broken coffee mug scattered on the floor, at the life he had thought familiar and understood, now shattered into tiny pieces. "Everything, Mom. Everything isn't what it seems. And you're going to explain why." "I'll be there in 15 minutes, she replied. And he heard her hastily grab her keys. She hastily grabbed her keys, and Garrett, ending the call, turned to Roland. "You have 15 minutes to tell me everything I need to know before she gets here." "Just one thing," Roland replied, pulling Penny onto his lap. "Whatever happens next, remember that everyone in this story loved you. Our love may have been imperfect, flawed, and terribly executed, but it was always genuine." Penny looked at Garrett with her clear, naive eyes, asking, "Are you part of our family now?" Garrett didn't have an answer to that question yet, but he knew that in 15 minutes he would get answers from the woman behind this entire tragedy, from the woman he had once trusted most in the world, who had taken him to an empty grave for 15 years while sleeping with the man who destroyed their family. His mother had to answer for her actions. 20 minutes later, Garrett heard the sound of a key turning in the lock. His mother always used her spare key, never knocking, a mother's privilege, as she liked to say. She entered, already speaking, her nurse's instinct to assess and fix evident in her hurried words. "Garrett, dear, what happened? You sounded so distressed on the phone. Are you sick? Did something happen at school?" She froze when she saw Roland. The blood drained completely from her face, and Garrett thought she might faint. Her purse slipped from her shoulder, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Keys fell from her numb fingers, clinking against the hardwood. "Hello, Vera," Roland said softly. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We had a deal. You promised. You swore you'd never come back." "The deal is off, Mom," Garrett said, his voice hard as steel. "Harold Brennan is dead. He confessed everything. Roland's name is cleared. The entire foundation of your lies has crumbled." She sank into Garrett's armchair as if her bones had suddenly dissolved, and she aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Her carefully maintained composure, the strong nurse's facade she had worn his entire life, completely collapsed. "You don't understand what I did for you, Garrett," she said, tears already streaming down her face. "Then make me understand," Garrett shouted, surprised by the force of his own anger. "Make me understand why you let me mourn a living man, why you took me to an empty grave every Sunday, why you built my entire life on a colossal lie." "Because the alternative was worse," she cried back. "Do you know what would have happened to you if you had a father in prison? The shame, the whispers, the judgment. I grew up with that burden. My father was a convicted thief. It ruined my childhood, ruined my mother, ruined any chance at a normal life until I moved to the States and started over." "So you chose to ruin my adult life instead?" Garrett asked. "I gave you a hero to mourn instead of a criminal to visit in prison." She stood now, fierce in her conviction. "I gave you beautiful memories instead of shameful ones. I gave you a father who died tragically instead of one who lived as a convict." "But I wasn't guilty," Roland spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "You knew that, Vera. You knew Harold framed me." "But you couldn't prove it," she countered, and Roland flinched. Guilty or not, the accusation would have haunted Garrett forever. Every job interview, every background check, every Google search would have brought up his embezzler father. "I couldn't let that happen." "That wasn't your choice," Garrett said quietly, his anger giving way to something worse. Disappointment. His mother looked at Penny for the first time, studying the little girl who had been silently observing from Roland's lap. "Who is she?" "My daughter," Roland said. "Your son's half-sister, born 6 years ago in Portland. Her mother, Linda, died last year of cancer. Now we are alone." He protectively stroked Penny's hair. "That's another reason I'm here. If anything happens to me, Penny needs family. A real family, not one built on lies." A ringing silence fell over the room, broken only by the refrigerator's monotonous hum and the sound of Penny's stuffed elephant falling to the floor. Garrett picked up the toy, returned it to the little girl, and received in return a touching smile, a mirror image of his own childhood photos. "All those Sundays," Garrett said, his voice trembling. "All those tears at the cemetery. Were they real?" "Every single one," his mother whispered. "I mourned the life we lost, the family we could have been. I grieved for my marriage, for my choices, for my lies. I grieved for the affair that ruined everything. Those flowers were real, Garrett. The grief was real, just not for the reasons you imagined." "The affair," Garrett echoed. "Roland told me you had a relationship with Harold Brennan." His mother's face sagged as if she had aged several years in an instant. "It was the most terrible mistake of my life. 2 years of recklessness that cost me everything. Harold was charming, powerful, everything Roland wasn't. Roland was steady, quiet, predictable. I craved excitement, but in the end, I only got destruction." "Did you love him?" Roland asked, with no trace of anger in his voice, only genuine curiosity. "I thought I did," his mother confessed. "But I only loved the illusion he created, the power, the danger, the secret meetings. When I realized he had used me to spy on you, to find out if you suspected him of embezzlement, I wanted to die. I betrayed my husband for a criminal who used me to frame him." "So faking his death was a kind of atonement?" Garrett clarified. "It was protection," she countered. "Harold agreed to drop everything if Roland disappeared, but he also made it clear that if Roland ever resurfaced, he would expose evidence of our affair along with the fabricated embezzlement. Your father would be in prison. I would be exposed as an unfaithful wife, and you would be the son of a criminal and an unfaithful mother. Faking his death protected all of us." "Protected?" Garrett repeated bitterly. "Is that what you call 15 years of lies?" "Yes," she simply replied. "Because look at you now. You're a successful teacher, a respected man, untainted by scandal. Would you be standing here with that reputation if you had spent 15 years as the son of an embezzler?" "I would be standing here with my father," Garrett exclaimed. "I would have a person to call when I'm scared, someone to share my successes with, someone real, not a ghost." Suddenly, Penny spoke, her thin voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "My mommy's a ghost now, but Daddy says she's still with us in our hearts. Did you do that with your daddy? Keep him in your heart?" That innocent question seemed to break something inside everyone present. His mother burst into tears. Roland pulled Penny closer, and Garrett stood, caught between the living and the dead, between truth and lies, between forgiveness and anger. "The headstone," he finally said. "The empty grave I talked to for 15 years. Did you laugh at me? Did you think I was pathetic, pouring my heart out to an empty hole?" "I envied you," she said through her tears. "You could mourn genuinely. You could love a perfect memory. And I had to live with this chaos, with the guilt, with the complete collapse of everything. Every Sunday, when you talked to that stone, I wished I could trade places with you. Your grief was pure. Mine was poisoned by the truth." "There's nothing pure about grief built on a lie," Garrett countered. Roland stood, settling Penny back onto the couch. "Vera, I need to know something. If Harold hadn't died, if he hadn't confessed everything, would you have taken this secret to your grave?" She met his gaze for the first time. "Yes, I would have preferred Garrett to mourn you forever than risk him knowing the truth. Because the truth isn't always beautiful, Roland. The truth is his mother is an adulteress, his father was framed for embezzlement, and his entire life is built on the wreckage of adult mistakes. Sometimes a lie is more merciful than the truth." "No," Garrett said firmly. "A lie might seem easier, but it's never more merciful. You chose the easy way out, Mom. You chose to bury the truth instead of fighting for it. You chose to kill Dad instead of being there for him. You chose your reputation over our reality." She chose to preserve her flawless image, disregarding the reality they both shared. "I chose you," her voice desperate. "Everything I did was for you." But he finally understood the truth. "No, you chose yourself. You chose to avoid the public scandal of your affair. You chose the role of the grieving widow, not the guilty wife. You put your image above my father." The truth, stark and ugly, hung in the air. In his mother's eyes, the understanding of this bitter truth was reflected. All her justifications, all her talk of protection, boiled down to simple self-preservation, artfully disguised as a mother's sacrifice. 3 weeks had passed since the night his father's ghost knocked on his door. 3 weeks since the collapse of his carefully constructed world, built on 15 years of lies. 3 weeks of reevaluation, questions, and the slow dawning of the true meaning of forgiveness. He and his mother remained silent. Every day, at exactly 7:00 a.m., a text message arrived on his phone, the same time they used to meet for their Sunday cemetery visit. The message was always the same: "I love you." He read it every morning over his coffee, staring at the words and wondering if love could exist in the shadow of a lie. He hadn't replied yet, but he hadn't blocked her number either. His therapist considered that progress. Roland rented a small 2-bedroom apartment 2 miles away near a good school for Penny. He was substitute teaching at Jefferson Middle School, hoping to find a permanent accounting job. It turned out they both became teachers, each in their own way. Roland's path dictated by necessity, Garrett's by false memories of his father's dreams. "Maybe it's genetic," Roland joked last week over coffee. "Maybe you were destined to teach, regardless of my wishes." It was the first time they had laughed together, albeit softly, over identical coffee cups. It felt like building a bridge, plank by plank. Penny spends time with Garrett after school while Roland works. She spreads her homework on the kitchen table, the same table where he used to grade papers alone. Now, the table is adorned with children's drawings and first-grade math problems. She constantly draws their family, 3 figures holding hands, sometimes 4 when she depicts her mother as an angel. Yesterday, she drew Garrett next to Roland, and above them, in clumsy letters, she had written, "My daddy and my brother." "Garrett, do you hate my daddy for leaving?" she asked one day, her pencil hovering over a drawing of the house where, she said, they would all live someday. "No," he replied honestly, sitting beside her. "I hate the situation. I hate it when adults make impossible choices, but I'm learning that sometimes people do the wrong thing for the right reasons. Like when Daddy makes me eat vegetables even though I hate them." "Exactly," he said, and she giggled, returning to her drawing with the childlike certainty that everything would eventually be all right. He and Roland met twice a week at a small downtown coffee shop, neutral territory where they were building their relationship from the ground up. Roland showed him photos from his life in Portland, filling in the 15-year gaps, Penny's first steps, her mother Linda laughing on a beach, birthdays he'd missed, Christmas mornings spent without him. He showed him his teaching awards, photos of his students, the life he had built on the foundation of his supposed death. "Your mother meant well," Roland said yesterday, stirring sugar into his black coffee, a habit they, it turned out, shared. "I know," Garrett admitted, though the words tasted bitter. "But meaning well and doing well aren't the same thing. She protected me from one pain by inflicting another. The pain of truth versus the pain of lies. The anguish of truth versus the torment of lies, such is the eternal choice. As a wise person once claimed, both inflict suffering. The fundamental difference, however, is that truth, like a skilled healer, ultimately mends wounds, leaving behind only a clean scar. Lies, on the other hand, like an untreated illness, merely exacerbate suffering, festering into putrid sores in the soul. A recent call from the cemetery disrupted the usual flow of life. Staff had noticed that Garrett hadn't visited Roland Hayes' grave for 3 long weeks, marking the longest break in 15 years. The groundskeeper, concerned by this unusual circumstance, reached out. "Should we continue to maintain the plot?" he inquired, adding that the flowers had lost their freshness. Pondering the question for a long time, Garrett immersed himself in memories of countless Sundays spent in one-sided conversations with a headstone and silent grass. "Yes, continue to maintain it, but make changes to the headstone," he finally replied. "Let it become a symbol of the lost 15 years, which deserve proper mourning." Instead of another visit to the empty grave, this Sunday, Garrett decided to take Penny to the zoo. While they enjoyed the animals, Roland and his mother would meet face-to-face for the first time since their long estrangement. They needed to talk openly, without outside eyes, to analyze the decisions made, unearth the buried truth about their failed marriage, and perhaps find forgiveness, or at least mutual understanding. At the very least, they needed to find a way to coexist peacefully in Penny's life, for she deserved a complete family, even if it was fragmented. Garrett realized that death wasn't the only way to lose a loved one. Sometimes, living people become ghosts, haunting lives they are forbidden to touch. His mother had created a ghost to shield him from shame. Roland had become a ghost to protect him from scandal, and he, in turn, had spent 15 years talking to a lifeless stone instead of a living person. Truth isn't always clear and simple. Love isn't always honest. Protection isn't always beneficial. A mother's love can be both fierce and destructive. A father's absence can be both a betrayal and a sacrifice. And a son's grief can be both genuine and misguided, mourning someone who never left him. However, Penny, with her childlike candor, reminded him of one important thing. When she asked why there were so many pictures of her daddy in the hallway, Garrett replied, "Because I missed him." To which the little girl, with a wisdom unique to children, remarked, "But you don't have to miss him anymore. He's here now, and you can make new pictures." She was right. The past 15 years couldn't be reclaimed. The conversations at the cemetery couldn't be rerouted to their intended recipient. The important moments Roland had missed couldn't be recreated. But the next 15 years were yet to be written. And for the first time since he was 17, Garrett had a father to help him write them. Perhaps not a perfect father. Perhaps the relationship wouldn't be without its clouds, but it was something real, not just a piece of stone. Yesterday, Penny asked if they could ever live together, her daddy and her brother in the same house. Garrett replied that perhaps someday, when everyone's hearts had healed a little. The little girl accepted this with the childlike faith that someday would surely come. "Will Grandma Vera live with us too?" she asked. The word grandma clutched at Garrett's heart. His mother didn't know Penny called her that in her drawings. She didn't know that, despite everything, she was still a part of this fragmented family portrait. "I don't know," Garrett honestly told Penny. "Families are complicated." "My teacher says complicated means hard but not impossible," she replied, returning to her coloring with determination. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps complicated just meant harder, but not impossible. Perhaps forgiveness wasn't forgetting the lies, but understanding the fear that spawned them. Perhaps family wasn't about perfection, but choosing to rebuild after destruction. The empty grave remained at Riverside Cemetery, but they didn't have to stay there. They could choose life, growth, forgiveness, even when it was complicated, even when it was hard, even when 15 years of lies stood between them and the truth. 3 weeks ago, Roland had knocked on the door, returned from the dead with a daughter Garrett never knew existed. He brought truth shrouded in pain, a revelation steeped in betrayal, and somehow a family made of strangers. All of them were learning to live with the resurrection, with the messy reality of lives that continued after they were supposed to end. The dead don't always stay buried. Sometimes they return, carrying pink backpacks and painful truths, ready to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. And sometimes that's exactly the miracle they need, even if it's not what they prayed for at an empty grave. His name is Garrett Hayes. His father is alive, his mother is a liar, his sister is 6 years old, and his family, complicated and fragmented as it is real. Finally, after 15 years of fiction, it is real. And that truth is worth more than all the perfect lies in the world.